Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea Time History Chat Live. I'm back from the private life of Anne Boleyn tour, so I'll tell you all about that. But thank you for joining me live. I'm streaming live on YouTube and Facebook and on Instagram. So I've not been with you for a couple of weeks because last week it was the day before the beginning of the tour. I was making my way down to London, and the week before it was just full on with preparation. So it's good to be back. It's good to be back. I actually won't be here next week, but I'll tell you a bit more about that later. Thank you while you're watching. If you're supporting me with badges on Instagram, super chats and stickers on YouTube, and stars on Facebook. But of course, what I really want you to do is come and join my Patreon. And I have a lot of thank yous to give out for people who have done just that. Heather, Henrietta, Holly, Daphne, Jane, Jean, Tina, Kim, and Rachel have all joined Patreon in the last few weeks. Now, that means that they're going to get access to even more. I've added even more things, and those being the talks from the tours. So I actually have recorded the tour talks from the Anne Boleyn tour in May. So that's Gareth Russell, Tracy Borman, and Jonathan Foyle. And also the tour talks from the Private Life of Anne Boleyn tour, which has just finished. There was 3 talks in succession, taking us through Anne's life from Gareth Russell, and an incredible talk from Kate McCaffrey at Hever Castle about Anne Boleyn's one of Anne's most personal possessions, her Book of Hours, and the research Kate has done into the Book of Hours. But also, she was able to talk to us about Thomas Cromwell's Book of Hours, which has been identified by the team at Hever as being in the same print run. And very excitedly, in fact, I have the book so I can show you. Very, very excitedly, is the one that is featured in the Holbein portrait of Thomas Cromwell. That is actually at Hever Castle, and so I was able to see that, so I'll tell you a bit more about that as well. Chewing gums, welcome, and yes, listen later. Lovely to see you though. Hello Lisa, hello Toram, hello to all of you watching on Instagram. Oh, let me just get the comments up. Oh, I can't do it. Oh, I'm trying to get them up so I can see them all. So apologies. Right, I won't mess anymore. So this time last week, I was heading down to London to meet the group. We had a lovely small group this time round. So I take, all our groups are very small. So I take a maximum of 20 people on a tour, because that gives you access not only to the venues that we go to and all that comes with that, better travel time, transfer times and things like that, because you're not waiting for so many people, but also access to the guides. You can hear them, access to the tour historian, Gareth, who is with us the entire time, access to the speakers, and also any more than, well, with 20, everyone makes friends, and it's sort of one group. It's really great. So so this time last week I was actually on my way down to London, to meet the group, and we spent the first 4 nights staying in beautiful Tewkesbury, which is up in Gloucestershire. So if you're following my story on Instagram and Facebook, you would have seen, yes, Beverly, of course, I missed HAD last week. I missed History After Dark because I was away. But did they behave themselves? But they didn't. Probably not. Good. Well, we're talking. Well, I might as well tell you now. Tonight on History After Dark, 8:15, we are talking. We're letter R in the Deceased Gits series, and we are talking Richard Rich. So that is going to be a good one. You must tune in for that one tonight, or get it on, watch it again over on YouTube. So Heidi, welcome, joining after missing about 5 weeks. Well, yes, I'm back this week, and then next week I might just have to do it a different day. I won't be doing it Wednesday. I'll tell you for why. It's because I'll tell you after I've been. I don't advertise where I'm going before I do, for various and probably quite obvious reasons. So I will be traveling somewhere on Wednesday and Thursday, which I will be able to tell you all about after the fact. Um, so yeah, so the tour, we started off, we were staying, so like I say, in Tewkesbury, and in fact the hotel that I use there, the um well, as you come into the hotel, the grounds, you're actually on the edge of the Tewkes of the battlefield from the Battle of Tewkesbury of 1471, this final um battle of the wars of the first lot of the Wars of the Roses, second lot of the Wars of the Roses, between Edward the Fourth and Margaret of Anjou's forces, where um, Edward, the Prince of Wales, Henry the Sixth's son, he dies. Um, anyway, the edge of the battlefield is actually on the grounds of the hotel that we stayed in, and so we drove past Tewkesbury Abbey every day. And in fact, on the first day, we visited Tewkesbury Abbey, so we were able to. This is because it was actually visited by Anne Boleyn in 1535, and chewing gums. Let's be honest, we're all a lot better with our history knowledge because of Philippa. I barely used to know the difference between Queen Anne and the current Princess Anne. I'm sure you're putting yourself down there. So yeah, so we visited Tewkesbury Abbey. Like I say, Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII visited there in the summer of 1535. So we were using the part of the summer progress of 1535 as a backdrop to look into Anne and the person. So obviously Anne's story can be focused a lot on her downfall and what sort of the politics were around that and the events around that time. And this gave us a chance to go right back and have a look at Anne's life. Tewkesbury Abbey, like I say, is somewhere she went, but it was also the burial place of the Duke of Clarence, so Edward the Fourth's second brother, elder brother to Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who had become Richard III. He is buried there with his wife Isabel Neville. Like I said, Henry VI's son, Edward, Prince of Wales, died soon after, probably not during, but soon after the Battle of Tewkesbury. He is buried there. Above where he is buried, Edward IV had his badge, the Sun in Splendour, emblazoned on the ceiling. So that is directly above Edward's, well, the plaque that marks that Edward is buried there somewhere. It's a fascinating place. Now, earlier on in the day, so I should say Tewkesbury Abbey is actually a parish church and was saved at the dissolution of the monasteries by the local parishioners who were able to raise the 400 and something pounds, I think it was, that they needed to buy the church. And the amount that was thank you, Nordic Queen, love listening to your stories, thank you. The amount of money that the parishioners had to pay for their church was equivalent supposedly to the amount of the value of the lead on the roof and all of the materials from the building that the King's Commissioners would have stripped and sold. So it became a parish church. So the church exists, it remains, but the rest of I think it was a Benedictine monastery. The rest of that, there's remnants, but hardly anything left. Now that is in contrast to the place that we went just before Tewkesbury Abbey, Hales Abbey. Hales Abbey was the third most important site of pilgrimage in pre-Reformation England. And this is because it had its relic that it had, that so pilgrims would go to see relics. It might be a piece of the original cross, it might be a piece of hair or a bone or a tooth or a skull or something of a saint. This is supposed to have had, Hales is supposed to have had a vial of Christ's blood from the crucifixion. And the provenance of the blood was supposed to have come through um, a younger brother of, I want to say Edward the First, who had gone on crusade and had got it from a reliable source who said that it had been also part of the coronation regalia of Charlemagne. So it's supposed to have had a good provenance, and it's brought back to Hales. It becomes obviously something that pilgrims want to come and venerate, and so Hales becomes um, one of the largest pilgrimage sites in pre-Reformation England, alongside, say, Canterbury for Becket, and I can't remember, and Walsingham for the Lady at Walsingham, shrine to Our Lady at Walsingham. So it's not only it's an important site, it's huge. The church would have been really large, and there's no remain. Well, there's hardly any remains. It's incredibly pretty site. You have part of the cloisters left. You have mounds where the altars were, which have been put there to sort of show. I say put there. I actually didn't ask what was underneath these mounds, whether there's anything that's actually, part of it that's still underground. Amanda, hi. Amanda was on the tour. So we got an idea how they've laid out the site, just how large the church of Hales Abbey had been. And like I said, later in the day we went to Tewkesbury Abbey, which sort of had the church but not the rest. And Hales Abbey, so it's got a little bit of the cloisters left. You can tell again how large that would have been. Interestingly, for any water geeks, well, I think everyone finds this kind of thing interesting. They had running water, and actually I've seen this at other monastic sites where they used really similar technology to how the Romans would have had water moved around the country as well. And they basically piped it in from they would create ponds that would then which would gather the water, so a reservoir effectively. They would have a lower pond with a sluice gate, which could be lifted and shut as required, and that would regulate the flow down into the site, which would go through. And so that basically they would have water underneath their privies, so that would flush away any of the waste, and they would have fresh running water, for hand washing and things like that. They certainly did have that in places like Cleeve Abbey in Somerset. So that was interesting to see as well, because of course that being slightly more underground has survived. So we were very fortunate that when we got to site, there was a guide on site. They didn't think they'd have any that day, called Steve, who was able to just bring the site to life for us and explain exactly how all the different parts of the of that site were used. That was fabulous. Now, there's a hidden gem. So if you ever do go to Hales Abbey, in fact, it's not that hidden. The reason it looks hidden is because it's at your back. When you park up to go into the Abbey, it's behind you, and it is Hales Church. And this church predates the Abbey. And it was absorbed sort of into the monastic complex. Pilgrims would go to this church and they would worship there. There's a big St. Christopher on the wall facing you, actually, not facing sideways. He's face on. He's on the wall alongside many other sort of 13th century wall paintings which still exist, some better condition than others. The pilgrims would go to that church before they came to the Abbey Church to visit the Blood of Hales. So we went there as well, and that was our second stop of the day, because we'd been in the morning to Sudeley Castle, again another stop on Anne and Henry's Progress of 1535, and this is also where Catherine Parr is buried. It's where she died and is buried. Buried in one of the first Protestant royal services, or the first royal Protestant burial service, and buried in the church there. There's a whole other story about her body being discovered and reinterred. But so we got to do that. Now, you also, if you go to Sudeley Castle, walking in the footsteps of Richard III, who, as Duke of Gloucester, owned the castle, had a great hall built, of which much of it came down after the English Civil Wars. The castle owners held out for the crown. In fact, I think Prince Rupert was there for a short while. And it took a barrage. There's a cannonball hole still in one of the towers. So a lot of Richard III's Great Hall is left, and again, you're sort of left with just one wall with foliage growing up it and looking rather beautiful. It would be great to have the whole thing, but anyway, we have the ruin. So you're following his footsteps. You're also following in Elizabeth I's footsteps as well, because she visited Sudeley as well. So that was our first day: Sudeley Castle, Hales Abbey, and Tewkesbury Abbey. Let me just go out of shot for a moment, because that night, I want to get this right. Gareth gave us the first of a series of talks. Now, what Gareth did. Gareth Russell is our tour historian. He comes with us. And what he did was give us a series of 3 talks. Hello, Melissa. How are you? To take us through Anne's life. Now, the story can go with Anne. Anne was sort of not quite a commoner, but was only really prominent due to the rise of her father's position at court. And in fact, they were she was a descendant of incredibly wealthy Irish aristocratic family. So his first talk was, what did he title it? I'm trying to find it now. It talked about, the making of a lady. So Anne Boleyn, the making of a lady. So her background, which was fascinating. Now, if you're a member of my Patreon, you will get all these talks. I've recorded them. I need to do editing and such like, so they're not going to be with you probably for a week, and I'm not going to give you them all in one go, because there's quite a lot. So we'll in Patreon, we'll have these talks out over the next few months, take us up to the end of the year. But anyway, so Gareth's talk will be in there, and the background to Anne, her family, and such. It's really fascinating, because it turns on its head this idea that Anne kind of just came from almost nowhere. Good morning, Rennie. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm apologise, of course, that I have been away for the last couple of weeks, and I apologise in advance because I am somewhere else next week. But then I'll be able to tell you about where I'm going, so it will be very worth it. So that was our first day: Sudeley Castle, Hales Abbey, and Tewkesbury Abbey. Indeed. The following day, we went to this place. Blows me away every time we go there. It is Gloucester Cathedral. Some of you will know it from Harry Potter. Some of you will know it from the film that I can never remember. It's just the film about Elizabeth I. Golden Years? Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, you will recognise it from many a backdrop. So Gloucester Cathedral was our stop first thing on our second day. And we were actually there a little bit earlier, as I tend to want to be. So we visited the Bishop Hooper Memorial, which is just outside one of the original gates. So Gloucester Cathedral had been St. Peter's Abbey at the time that Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII visited in 1535. So it became Gloucester Cathedral after the dissolution. But one of the gates is called St. Mary's Gate, and that's an original. The Bishop Hooper was a bishop that in fact came from Cleve Abbey that I just mentioned earlier, and he refused to renounce his faith once when Mary the First was on the throne. He was a reformer. He had been he was of a new way of thinking. I mean, when he was resident in Gloucester, he would have all sorts of people to dinner. It wasn't just the high and the mighty. He 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 would have everyone, and he was popular. And in fact, Gloucester, when we had the English civil wars of the 17th century, Gloucester was a puritanical city in terms of its general uh, uh, approach to religion at that point. And you could maybe trace that back to Bishop Hooper's influence back in the 16th century. Now, of course, Mary wasn't that tolerant of people not wishing to convert back. So Bishop Hooper John Hooper was burnt at the stake outside of the Abbey precinct, just outside St Mary's Gate. And like I say, St Mary's Gate actually still exists. So I'm reading the comments at the same time. The monk, the chapter of the cathedral were made to watch. But actually, thousands of people turned up to watch Hooper's execution in support of him. Now, can't remember the year, but there was some excavation work going on in that little area outside the gate, and they found, so the story goes, the bottom of a charred stake, and so that is now in the Folk of Gloucester, which is close by to the cathedral, and that they think is the stake that Bishop Hooper was executed on. So we went to see the Victorian monument to Hooper, which is on the site of that discovery. Around the side, so if you keep walking around, you will find a school. You will find the frontage of near this school, so you can't go. It's on the roadside, so you can see, and there's not a lot of it left, but that is what is left of either the abbot's lodgings or the senior monks' lodgings, with an oriel window overlooking what's now a road and a car park. But it's really quite beautiful. And again, Anne probably would have recognised it. So we took a walk around there to have a look at that. And then we went into the cathedral. And I think Gloucester Cathedral, it builds. So some cathedrals you go in and it's an immediate wow. Actually, Tewkesbury Abbey is very much like that. Gloucester is quite pale in comparison. There doesn't seem to be much painting. There's nothing on the nave ceiling. And but then you start going around and it just keeps on giving and giving and giving and giving. And we had a fantastic tour guide again taking us round. She was telling us all about Rennie. I can't pull up pictures while I'm live. I haven't got anything like that ready, and I can't do it on Instagram either. So, but I will be posting all about the tour anyway. If you yeah, I'll be posting all about the tour anyway, so I will do that. And you can see my story as well, as from last week. I think that's stored under tours. Oh, there's quite a lot in there now. Now, it's a site of Gloucester Cathedral has also been the site of a coronation. The young Henry the First, King John's son, and also a site of a royal burial. So Edward II is buried there. So you get to see those. Oh, and also Robert, Duke of Normandy. So William I's eldest son was given Normandy. His second son, William Rufus, was given England. Now, he wasn't too pleased about this. Oh, and then when Rufus died, of course, his son. Oh, so it must have been Henry II. Henry the. Well, I've lost my track of my numbers, but anyway, the whole shooting incident in the New Forest. His younger brother, who'd only been left money originally, quickly gets himself to London and gets himself crowned. The elder brother isn't too happy about this, comes back. Henry III, Beverly, thank you so much. This is what happens when I go off on tangents. I can't remember my numbers. Anyway, so Robert, Duke of Normandy, he basically lost to Henry III. He was captured. He lived in Cardiff Castle for something like 20 years, learnt Welsh, wrote poetry, eventually died, and is buried in Gloucester Cathedral. He also has a tomb there somewhere. He's buried somewhere there, but he does have a tomb there. There is a stained glass window, huge stained glass window, which has sort of the hierarchy. So there's a line of I'm not as au fait with my religious bits as I maybe should be, but you have so in you have the nobles, you have so people who might have sponsored the window, whatever. Then you have the I don't know, the saints, the apostles, and it goes on and up to the Holy Spirit, the Holy Trinity, excuse me. That window was removed during the Second World War for fear of the cathedral being bombed and the glass being lost. And it was put back really, really quite well. There were a couple of bits in the wrong position, but it's a really impressive, huge stained glass window. The other thing about Gloucester Cathedral is it still has its Lady Chapel. Lady Chapels were mainly taken down because in the after the Reformation, because it's a Catholic thing to venerate the Virgin Mary. So you still have that, which is fantastic survivor, built toward the end of the abbey's existence. So you still have that, and then you hit the cloisters. The cloisters are just magnificent. They are fantastically preserved. So you can get a really great idea of what these places, what these abbeys would have looked like, what the cloisters would have looked like. Gloucester is a particularly good example. You, as you're walking around, you have doorways that used to go off into, might have gone off into the library, might have gone off into the refectory, or the dormitory, in fact. You also have the lavas there, so the water channel, which used to run with fresh water for the monks to wash their hands. You have the alcove where they would hang their towels. I don't know what their towels made of. Cloth, presumably, actually. So it's really a beautiful place, and in fact I find it so intriguing, and when I take people there, they love it so much that I've actually put it into the Rise of the Tudors tour next September, so September 2024, because we go by it. It's not actually part exactly of the early part of the Tudor story that I'm trying to tell in that tour. However, it's just such a beautiful place that I can't go past it and not take people there. So we're going to be going there. Anyway, so that was the morning. And then in the afternoon, we went to Acton Court. Acton Court is rarely open to the public. And it was built, it was the house of Sir Nicholas, take the Sir off for a moment, Nicholas Points. His grandfather had been knighted, on the battlefield of the Battle of Bosworth by the new Henry VII, as he after his victory. So Nicholas Points was hoping he was anticipating that Henry and Anne might visit in 1535. Um, that's the link, by the way, to all these places. So if you've just joined, and he had a entire wing, the East Wing, built for their potential visit. He didn't know if they were going to visit. Anyway, but in the end, they did. They visited for, I think it's 3 days they stayed, which is fairly. Um, that's good. That's good if the king wants to come and stay with you for 3 days. And indeed, he was knighted, possibly almost or on the day that his grandfather had been knighted at the Battle of Bosworth. So he becomes Sir Nicholas Points. And the wing that he built is really well preserved because after a certain amount of time, the estate was rented out to sort of like tenant farmers, people who didn't have the money to do or the permission to make any major alterations. So you can see, actually, it's very interesting because they're quite bare. They're quite stark. Now, some of that might be because things have been covered over, things have been repaired, but actually it gives you a really good idea as to what these houses would look like when someone wasn't in residence. Because remember, they would be taking their tapestries and their carpets, their rugs with them, their furniture with them wherever they were going. When they weren't in residence, they would be quite stark. They would be quite empty. However, there is also, so first of all, I should say about the layout of the rooms. It goes from a presence chamber to a slightly smaller privy chamber to the smallest bed chamber with private garderobe. That would have been Henry's bedroom. So the room before it was a privy room, a privy chamber, and the furthest one out and the largest one was the presence chamber. In the privy chamber, so the middle of those 3 rooms, you go through the door, you think, oh, another kind of, I can see remnants of some red paint there. There's red paint on the doorways, by the way, and the door frames. If you ever do get to go have a close-up look. There's a little fireplace there. You can see how the subsidence has sort of moved the window. Well, you can see the subsidence because you have a window and then a more modern window frame, window sill in front of it, and you can see the window sort of at an angle compared to the windowsill. You turn back round and you look up, and there is a frieze, a black and white with a little bit of colour actually, frieze on the top of the ceiling, top of the wall, excuse me. And it looks to depict a summer scene. So the thought is that also think it's Holbein designed. So the thought process goes that if that's summer, obviously you have 4 walls, maybe the other 3 walls, which have now those decorations have gone, maybe you would have had the other 3 seasons on the other 3 walls. And so either way, Anne would have seen, Anne and Henry, but we always like to focus on Anne. Anne would have seen this frieze on the wall. Underneath it are some delightful drawings underneath of little of planes basically, and during World War II, it was a farmhouse, and that was the boys' bedroom, and they've drawn bomber. There's a Spitfire and a bomber, I think, on the wall. It's really cute. And then, like I say, you go into Henry's bedchamber, which is panelled. I'm not sure if the panelling is original or whether it's original panelling that's been brought there, but either way, there's you get a feel for what the room would have been like. Also, actually, I should mention that on that frieze, I have a photo of this, so if I remember, I will share it. There is a Jacobite sympathetic message. So, God save the King, 17 something. Julian still only probably knows. So yeah, which was I kept that a surprise for Gareth, and he looked back round and he was like, oh, "There's a Jacobite inscription." Yes. I love doing things like that. So that was our second day, Gloucester Cathedral and Acton Court. The following day, we went to Berkeley Castle. Berkeley Castle again, has an incredibly long history. The actual site has an even longer history. There was a priory there, now long gone, but again, this is a place that Anne and Henry came in 1535. It's actually a place as well that that their daughter Elizabeth would visit. And I can't remember who lived there at the time, but she didn't like them. So she would come and hunt all of their deer, or a good proportion of their deer, um, basically wipe their stocks and then go. That's what it's a kind of like. She was almost like a sort of 16th century passive aggressiveness. Um, and the lawn on which she played bowls is still there because it's a terrace garden at the back. At the back of my castle, terrace garden. And yes, so the bowling lawn where her bowling lawn was, which is now a lawn as well, is there. Now if you ever get to go to Berkeley, do go down to the gardens and look back up at the castle. It's just a pretty castle. In fact, Gareth said to me, it's a pretty castle. Like you don't generally get a castle that looks pretty. It might be impressive, it might be awesome, but pretty, not always necessarily. But this one is pretty. You have a hole in the wall, in the not quite, is it the curtain wall? It's not really the curtain wall, but it's actually one of the inner walls. Anyway, that was taken down during after the Civil War. Again, held out for the losing side. And we had a tour of that castle. It's privately owned, still lived in by the Berkeley family, or by their descendants. And you do get to see a lot of the castle. Now, this is where Edward II died. Edward II, who is buried in Gloucester Cathedral, whose tomb we had seen the previous day, murdered. His murder is the one that is the pretty much debunked, and eyes rolled at red hot poker story, because it just doesn't make any sense. But Edward II was most likely homosexual, and it's thought to be a slur on that, the red hot poker story, then somehow somewhat supposedly justified by the idea that there's no marks left on the body. I don't know about you, but I don't think that would leave no marks on the body at all. And it's literally overkill. So much more likely he was starved or smothered to death, or a bit of both. Incredibly big man, 6'2", strong, healthy up until the point of imprisonment. So likely weakened and then smothered, in my opinion. So that was Berkeley Castle. Now, while we're at Berkeley Castle, I had arranged for a private falconry demonstration for our group. So the ladies in the group, because they're all ladies this time, but the group got to hold the birds. We got to ask the falconer, Tony, all about the birds, his specific birds, but also about how do you train a bird? How do you train a falcon? Why did people fly them? Etc. etc. It was really great to have that access to such a knowledgeable person. And then we went down to the lawns, and he did a actual falconry demonstration. So if you were watching my story, you would have seen that Gareth was asked to try and outrun a Harris hawk. But he did clarify, well, how fast do you want me to run? And he was told, I don't know, a bit faster than walking. Anyway, so he did bit faster than walking, and then was mortified that he didn't manage to outrun the bird. So he assures me he could have sprint off faster than he in fact did in the end. So maybe I'll have to arrange it again just to give him another try. So that was our third full day, and Gareth gave us a talk that night. On what was his title that night? Oh yeah, the countdown to the progress. So he was looking at the year 1534 to 50, well, the years 1534 to 1535, and how things had started to move in Anne's world, and herself, what she was going through, and what was happening around her. Um, for anyone who's joined, and if you're a member of my Patreon, all of the talks from the tours this year will be released into my Patreon over the rest of the year. There were quite a few, so I already have seven. There's already seven, and there's going to be more from the September tour that's coming up as well. So if you're interested in actually listening to any of these talks, I would suggest joining my Patreon. It's £5 a month at patreon.com/British history. And the links are in my bio in definitely on Instagram. And also you can visit my website, britishhistorytours.com, to find the links. So, or just go straight to Patreon. The following day, we transferred down to Hever Castle. So we spent our final afternoon, evening, and morning at Hever Castle. Hever Castle is, of course, incredibly special. It wasn't on the 1535 progress, but oh, Chloe says she can't work Patreon out. Maybe I'll have to do a little a little how-to for Patreon. Yeah, you go there, choose don't choose kind supporter. If you're a kind supporter of me on Patreon, thank you so much. But it is just a support. You don't get access to anything. The next tier is £5, and actually you get access to everything. There's the option to give more if you want, but just choose the £5 tier and join it, and that will give you access to everything, including getting so you'll get these talks, you get all sorts. You get early access to tour tickets, which half filled the Rise of the Tudors tour, so it's well worth doing. You also get to put your questions to historians. So I will be asking very shortly for questions for Gareth Russell about his upcoming book on Hampton Court Palace. And then when those interviews are recorded, patrons get the ad-free and extended version. So any questions that are put to the historian about the from patrons, excuse me, then that is the extended version. So no one else gets to see those questions or the answers. So no, there's loads in there. So yes, so we transferred down to Hever Castle. More than half of our ladies dressed in Tudor royalty, Tudor dresses, dressed as queens, and yes, £5 in UK money, Chloe. Yeah. So that was Samantha Rees came down with her fantastic costumes. We also took a little walk up to St Peter's Church, which is just outside the boundary of Hever Castle, and this is where the Boleyn family would have gone on certain days, holy days and feast days, and worshipped sort of in the community, if you like, to be seen, to see the other noble families in the area, etc. Make those social connections. And Gareth did us a talk about the church and about how the Boleyns would have worshipped there. It's where Dawn was on the tour. Dawn is back. Dawn Kirby of Irby. Yes, thank you very much. Of course. I hope you got back safe, and I hope the trains were good to you. We went to St Peter's Church. That's where Thomas Boleyn is buried, and also one of Anne's infant brothers, which I can't remember which one now, is buried there as well. So that was just the start. We then had a talk from Kate McCaffrey. So again, if you're in my Patreon, this talk will become available over the next. I don't know which order I'm going to make them available, but anyway, that's going to be available from Kate, and she was talking about she did groundbreaking work, and I'm not saying that lightly. Looking at Anne Boleyn's Book of Hours. Now, there's traditionally two books of hours displayed at Hever Castle. They're in their possession. One is actually currently it's on loan to Hampton Court Palace. Now that is because the exhibition is looking specifically at Anne's printed book of hours. Now, if you want to get more information on that, I did an interview with Kate, which is available on YouTube, asking her about sort of how she got started, how she knew what she was looking for, what she found, what that tells us. Because, of course, a book of hours, or I should say, a printed book of hours, I'd sort of assumed was a bit like mass produced. It's not. This is very early on, and actually, they are all then illuminated and customized and personalized. You then get people writing in them themselves. Now, of course, Anne does write in hers herself as well, and then other people have done, and that's the basis of Kate's research, is looking at the other inscriptions that were in the book and tracing the provenance of the book. It still goes missing for 400 years, actually. If you listen to the interview with Kate, it's really fascinating. And then turns up at an auction, which Waldorf Astor purchases it, and it comes into Hever Castle's possession. So the exhibition is about the Book of Hours. During Kate McCaffrey's research, she discovered that there were a number of these books from the same print run, for want of a better term, still in existence. And she identified that the Morgan Library in New York held one of them, and it had belonged to Catherine of Aragon. So that book was on loan to Hever for the first part of their exhibition this year. So Catherine of Aragon's book was displayed in the same room, just a few feet away from Anne Boleyn's Book of Hours. So they were in the same room, reunited once again. That was incredible, but that had to go back to New York. Kate had also identified that Oxford also had, and excuse me for not remembering which exactly where, but anyway, it had held another copy from the same run. They went to see it. The curatorial team from Hever, so that's Alison Palmer, Owen Emerson, and Kate herself, and managed to identify that she. I think you need to turn your sound up, Robert. I think I'm nearly busting the I'm nearly busting it here. So they discovered, I think it might have been Alison, sort of went, doesn't that look to you a bit like the one in Thomas Cromwell's portrait? Because oh, thank you, Dawn. Wren Library, Trinity College. Thank you, Dawn. So in Wren Library, Trinity College, they had this book of hours. So they went to see it, and yes, like Alison, because it's bound, this one, and she said it looks like the one in Holbein's portrait of Thomas Cromwell. So they did more digging, and it turned out to be the one. So there's a little book that goes with the exhibition, and so you can just about see. This is the book, and it has the portrait of Cromwell, and you can see the book in the corner there. In the full portrait, you can see the full book. It's curious because it is a Catholic text, and why? So therefore, why is it on Cromwell's desk? Kate went into that during her talk to us that she gave. Not yesterday evening, the evening before. Only 2 days. It feels really weird. I don't know, Dawn, whether you feel this, and Amanda, if you're still on. It feels really weird that we were together only 2 days ago. 12. Just this time yesterday, pretty much. We'd only just said goodbye. But anyway, so Kate's talk, like I say, will be available to patrons. It's fascinating. Honestly, I kind of knew what she'd done, but as she went into it, my jaw was just dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping. It's just incredible. And what is really key here is we have historians coming in, younger historians, and they are just they're coming in with an open mind. They're not dismissing received history, but they just have an open mind to going and having a little look. Anne Boleyn's Book of Hours has been known about for, well, 100 years. And really eminent historians had either ignored it or not looked at it, or drew odd conclusions from it. So anyway, it's fascinating talk. Like I say, so that though wasn't the end of that evening either. We then went and had a hidden Hever tour. This is a tour of Hever Castle after hours, so it's closed to the public, and we were able to go around while it was closed, which was fabulous. And we finished the evening with dinner in the Great Hall of Hever Castle, and in fact, Alison Palmer, Owen Emerson, and Kate McCaffrey joined us for dinner. That was all wonderful. And it was great. It's really nice because Owen Emerson has, of course, if you don't know, announced that he will be leaving Hever Castle, and also none of them had ate in the Great Hall. So that was rather great. I was able to host them in the Great Hall just before Owen is leaving. So that was nice. So that was our final evening. And yesterday morning we had a lovely Hever breakfast and then headed back to London. So that was our tour. So I've nearly taken up an hour of your time already. So that is, I thought you might be interested though to hear about where we'd been and what we'd been up to. I have one more tour going this year, which you'll be able to follow on social media. It's the Elizabeth I and Mary Queen of Scots tour. There is the Anne Boleyn tour next May. There is the Rise of the Tudors, which Dawn is coming back on, year in September. That is on sale at the moment, and it is nearly full. I think I have two or three rooms left on that one. So if you're interested, head over to the website britishhistorytours.com and take a look. There may well be another Anne Boleyn tour because I'm fully booked for May. Have a massive waiting list for May 2025. So again, if you're interested, if you think you want to be on that tour, go into my Patreon, patreon.com/British History, because you will get a week to book onto it before anyone else. But I will let everyone know the details of it. Right then, everyone, I'm going to go and leave you to your day. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're around at 8:15 tonight, join us for History After Dark. We're talking about Richard Rich and all the dastardly things that man got up to. All right, everyone, take care. Have a great day. I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.